Here's some updates on the Camaros. Got them both sitting there. This is actually a good time to kind of compare the rear ends, because I got them switched. This one's got the 4th gen rear end, the 96 rear end. That one's got the 85 3rd gen rear end in it, which is also the reason why they got different, why this has actually got mismatched tires. The factory 4th gen back spacing won't fit on the 3rd gen because the 4th gen rear end is wider, and you can kind of see that when these rims were on this car before, they stuck in about here. So this is a couple inches wider on each side, because you see how the front are still inside the car where the back now stick out a little bit. So because of that wider, this being wider, the 4th gen rear tires won't fit on this car now. So I got my 14s on it, but the 14s don't fit the 4th gen rear end because of the caliper. Because this car, I believe, had an optional 14-inch rim, I think from the factory for the base model, and this one just had 16s. So that's a little bit of a trivia for you. I will also hopefully be posting a video sometime this year of me actually doing the axle swap. I kind of did a how-to on how to do it, but I got a guy editing it, and he's having some issues due to the file size. But here's the 85 with dual carbs. It runs now, except I'm really lean. And I think the reasoning to that is because each one of these carbs are designed to be ran on a motor individually, and due to it's now pulling through 2 carbs instead of 1, that it doesn't have the same air volume, so it's not pulling as much fuel out of each carb, so it's running leaner. I believe that's, at least that's my theory on that. It doesn't help I'm running 2 different carbs, though both are same CFM. One's a 1405, the other one's a 1406. I believe the front one is, you can't see in the video, the front's a 1405, the rear is a 1406. Both are 600 CFMs. The difference is one had an electric choke, one had a manual choke, but I removed all of that because screw chokes. Chokes are for pussies. Real men don't use chokes on their carbs. Real men who don't like going anywhere. But it runs. Haven't started it for like 2 weeks. 1 week, 2 weeks. I don't remember if I had it running last weekend or not. But fired up. But it's running super lean. I got an AEM wideband here. That's kind of just like tied into some of my wiring here, just as a temporary solution. Radio works. See, kind of chilling there. Pump it, look at that. Just like, it pegs right out. Fires red up. But man, does it fire up. But yeah, you see how it just pegs out. It's running really lean. Which, when I go to the Jegs website, there's 2 different jet kits, one for each carb, and the jets aren't the same size. But due to they're both 600 CFMs, I think one kit will work on both, or the same part number kit would work on both. I gotta call Edelbrock and talk to him about it a little bit. Because they're both the same CFM carb. I don't see them changing the interior or the internals of the carb just because one had manual choke and one had electric. I know the jets are different in each carb, which doesn't help my case either. And I don't know the fact that I'm running like 8 inches of exhaust pipe is affecting the reading of the gauge either. So there's a couple variables there that could be really set me up to not succeed at this, but I'm a little nervous to drive it due to the fact of it running so lean. But other than that, I mean, when I had the dual carbs on my 70 Riv, that thing was a nightmare to start. Where this, I mean, it fires right up. It's awesome. But it's also running lean, which I know the guy who ended up buying my 70 Riv blew the motor up because he tried selling it back to me, I think a year later after it happened. And I didn't have the money at the time to buy it back, or else I probably would have. But I think that's why that one maybe grenaded, is because I just put carbs on it and it ran, so I drove it. And if it was running lean, that's not good. Unfortunately, I had to cut a little bit of my wiper cowl here for the distributor, because the day before Memorial Day, I finished working on this whole setup. And I drove it around the block, come back, it's leaking oil. Here, I forgot to put the stupid gasket in. And it's like, oh, great. Well, that sucks. How do I pull the carb out? Then I'm like, well, it's just a 10-minute fix. Because I wanted to take it to the O'Connell Falls Memorial Day car show. I know it ain't no show car, but I was going to take it anyways. Don't care. I took home, when I first bought this car, I actually took home Best Unfinished at that show. And it hasn't been back since. I kind of wanted to bring it back just because it's like, cool. But it ended up raining anyway, so it's like I'm kind of glad I didn't take it. But because I ended up not going, because one, that took forever to do. It ended up being like a 3-hour project to get that distributor out. I had to pull the rear carb off because it wouldn't come off the barb fitting, so I couldn't pull the fitting out. And so I ended up pulling the carb off and setting it off to the side. Then I had to notch this to get the distributor out. And it was just a complete nightmare. And then once I got it all back together, now that I'm not running a hood, totally noticed I had a massive exhaust leak up here. So since then, I did change the gaskets. I don't got the package with me. I don't know the part number. But it's an expensive gasket. It was like 30 bucks. But if it ends up working, I'm going to run the same one on there because I'm sick of the Felt Pro ones blowing out. Because the ones on this car, I don't know, had a couple 100 miles on it, and they blew out. And it wasn't like the header bolts were loose or something. They just blew out. Junk. But this, I'm still need to do the cam bearings on the motor. So there's absolutely nothing. Here's the Ford 9-inch that's eventually going to go in the 3rd gen here. And then that rear end's going to go back in this car. But yeah, vast emptiness. So hopefully within the next 2 months there'll be a motor in this car running. That's kind of my goal. Now that I'm working again at a full-time job plus a part-time job, so now it's just time more than finances. But a little bit of an update of the inside of the car. Got some aftermarket gauges there, some glow shift gauges. eBay fine, and they're junk. I can't say they're junk, but I don't know how accurate they are. I know the oil pressure is kind of weird because it would once in a while read really high or read super low, and it's just like, well, when the factory gauge worked, it never did that. It just read a very nice number. Now the factory gauge quit working, so I went with this gauge pod here and put these gauges in it. And it was a thing I found on eBay. It came with the gauge pod and all this stuff, and it was reasonably priced, I thought, or a little on the cheap side. But I'm like, hey, if it works, it works. But it kind of don't work. But it did work when the oil pressure did fail on this car this last time, and it did say 0. So I turned around, and I wasn't sure if it was the gauge or the car. So I'm like, I'll turn around and go home, and made it in the driveway. And that's when the motor decided, like, yep, I'm done. It did turn over afterwards, but then I knew the gauge worked. And down there is a narrow band O2 gauge. Thought I bought a wide band. at the time. Kind of one of those things, if I knew then what I knew now, never bought this one, would have realized it's not a wide band, it's a narrow band, so some guy suckered me on that. Nice DVD player, it's a Jensen UV10, works great, I like it. Door panel's all apart because of window motor, and it's dumb. My window motors were getting really slow, and I'm like, well, maybe they're getting weak. Well, I got good voltage to the switch. I didn't check the voltage at the plug for the motors. So I'm like, whatever, I'll just buy a new window motor regulator. Or just a window motor, not the whole setup, but just a window motor. And put it in there, freaking nothing. That didn't even work. At least the factory one barely moved the window. But it wouldn't bring it all the way up. You kind of see it's down 1/4 of an inch. So I got a set of doors for it. I paid like 20 bucks for them. They're off of a base model with hand cranks, so I'm probably going to put those in. They're purple, but the exterior of them was spray painted yellow, so I don't know if there's a way for me to just get the spray paint off, but not ruin the paint underneath. I mean, granted, it's going to be probably a different shade from sun and damage and everything else, but if it's closer, it's better than a purple car with yellow doors. So, headliner's missing. Kind of see the substructure is very similar to a T-top. I would like to do a T-top conversion to this car. I should have bought a T-top car to begin with a 6-speed, but I didn't. I bought a hard top with an automatic that I converted to a 6-speed. You kind of see some of the modifications I had to do to make the T56 fit. Took a hole saw so I can use the sawzall to cut the hole. But I still run the automatic harness, so here's the neutral safety switch that has to be hooked up or else the car won't start. Kind of funny when someone's like, hey, can I borrow your car? I'm like, sure. And then I'll just go and take this thing and pop her all the way back, and they're like, hey, your car won't start. Well, it looks like you can't take it. What a dick. Anti-theft device. And then I thought, oh, if I put it in reverse, I should have reverse lights. Because since I don't have the T56 wiring harness, the car doesn't know it's in reverse. No, still don't have reverse lights. Don't understand why that is, but whatever. My pace setter long tube headers. My wore out 4th gen seats with a 200,000 mile car. Foam's all shot inside, so you can start to feel like the metal in the seat and everything. It sucks. Seat cover, I mean, the seat is still good. I mean, the seat cover did its job. It protected the seat cloth, but rocking my aftermarket taillights. When they're on, there's a LED ring around it that light up. And when I turn the blinker on or hit the brakes and the bulbs light up, that's the way I got them wired up. My buddy said, like, following me, when I'm just driving down the road with my running lights on and whatnot, or in headlights, but not using my turn signals or brakes. He says it kind of reminds him of a GTR with the roundness. So I'm like, well, that's kind of neat. Guess that's the update on the 2 Camaros.